I'm Jim Kircher, and a lot of attention, of course, has been paid this summer to the moon landing 50 years ago in the summer of 1969. But our first story predates that by 40 years, the summer of 1929, 90 years ago, and everybody back then was following a historic flight. Two pilots named Jackson and O'Brien took off from Lambert Field, and nobody knew when or how it was going to end. We can tell this story because we've got newsreel film, plenty of newspaper headlines, and in our archives, we had an interview with an old barnstormer who was there when it all happened. It was one of the most exciting eras in aviation. Technical advances, new business opportunities, and plenty of drama, excitement, and celebrities. And Americans just couldn't get enough of this stuff. The newspapers, radio, newsreels, they were constantly reporting on the exploits of pilots flying faster and farther. That summer, it seemed that somebody was always setting or trying to set an endurance record, most continuous hours in the air. On July 13th, a new record was set in California. And in St. Louis, a couple of Robertson aircraft pilots were already thinking of topping it. Robertson was building a new plane for the Curtiss-Wright Company, the Robin, a single-wing plane with an enclosed cockpit, and just as important, it had a newly designed air-cooled engine. A new plane that set a record, well, that would certainly help sales. But all this took planning and equipping a second plane that would deliver fuel in flight.
I helped out on the ground. I didn't do any of the flying.
In 1995, we interviewed Slim Roberts, who as a young aviator at Lambert Field, helped equip the airplane that would be used to refuel the Robin.
So as to make greater capacity, why, we rigged the tanks right at the back end of the fuselage for extra additional fuel.
With the Robin and its refueling plane ready, Dale Red Jackson and Forrest O'Brien took off on a Friday, the morning of July 11th, but without much fanfare. It did make the papers, but the head of Robertson Aircraft, Major William Robertson, at first merely described it as a test flight. But the bigger aviation story that day was about a transatlantic air race between a French and a Polish plane. One reason all this was so dramatic was the real danger of pushing these machines, and this race ended in tragedy. The St. Louis story then began to pick up steam as it became clear that the pilots had in fact set their sights on the endurance record. The coverage increased, and so did the crowds at Lambert Field.
A lot of crowd. You come there at nighttime, why, everybody came there.
The Robin was specially equipped with an extra fuel tank. The pilots worked 4-hour shifts. The one not flying would sleep on top of the fuel tank. There's no indication what they used to go to the bathroom or how they emptied it. There was a hatch behind the fuel tank where O'Brien would stand when the refueling plane positioned itself right above.
And you fly straight, you let the hose down, you put it in the tank, turn on the valve, and fill the tank up. Also send them any message you want to send them, food and everything else.
Newsreel coverage shows 2 canisters being filled with food, water, and messages, and it's possible that these are the pilots' wives. There was another canister that would be filled with oil for the engine. And attached to the outside of the Robin were catwalks leading up to the engine.
Now, the purpose of the catwalk was that if they had some troubles with the engine, they could repair it. Now, I wouldn't believe that. And by golly, Red still tells me that he changed some spark plugs. Now, how he got a plug in there, I don't know. But he said he did, and the engine kept running.
At 2 p.m. on July 23rd, O'Brien and Jackson broke the endurance record and said they planned to just keep going, and they did. St. Louis Mayor Victor Miller, who'd been planning to welcome them upon their landing, just gave up and went on vacation. The publicity was a boon to Robertson. Plane sales were up, and there was a cigarette company touting the importance of Terry tins to ease the strain for the pilots and the spectators. While all this was happening in St. Louis, there were planes in Houston and Minneapolis doing the same thing, going after the endurance record. On July 27th, the plane in Houston had to land because of mechanical issues. And shortly after that, the plane in Minnesota flew low to drop a note and then went into a spin and crashed, killing the pilot. Risk was part of this. That was understood. It was what made all of this so exciting. But it was another tragedy here at home that put a damper on the excitement here. George Lambert was killed in a crash in North St. Louis County while flying with a student pilot. George Lambert was the son of Albert Bond Lambert, the city's leading promoter of aviation. The airfield bore his name. He had backed Lindbergh's flight 2 years before, and he was an official observer of Jackson and O'Brien's endurance flight. There was now a growing sense that Jackson and O'Brien had pushed themselves and their plane far enough, and this flight needed a happy ending. The boss told them to come on down.
Now, they really wanted to stay up longer, and they would have stayed up longer, but they were told that the air in the tires on the landing gear will go flat. If you go to land, well, you'll tear up the airplane. So reluctantly, they shut off flying and come down.
They touched down after spending almost 18 days in the air. Officially, the new record, 420 hours, 21 minutes, 30 seconds. This was the best kind of news coverage for the industry and for the city of St. Louis. This was 90 years ago, the summer of 1929. A few months later, there would be a crash on Wall Street, and everything would change. But that July 90 years ago, St. Louis was flying high, making news in the final moments of the Roaring '20s.